印度要造第5代隐形战机，可能成功，也可能失败。只不过呀，给了别人是万一失败，而给了三哥呀是万一成功呢，对吧？10年磨一剑，一朝试锋芒。可这剑真磨得出来吗？印度在冲刺隐形战机，中巴在悄悄合体升级，而克什米尔依旧是火药桶。这不仅是国与国之间的较量，而是文明之间的选择题，是发展还是对抗？大家好，欢迎来到老友记，我是大钊。今天这期咱们继续从高志凯教授的一期犀利发言出发，带你深入一场波澜壮阔的地缘政治暗战，看看印度三哥的野心，中国的选择，巴基斯坦的命运跟阿富汗的迷途。
Just a couple of days ago, Professor Victor Gaur was teaching history to an Indian former general, General Bakshi, and an anchor, Arnab Goswami, who is more like a warmonger himself. But after his history lectures, both General Bakshi and General Major Arnab Goswami, they were speechless and they did not let him to complete his sentence later on. That shows their frustration. Professor, thank you very much. Let me repeat whatever you said on Indian channels before Arnab Goswami. You said that Pakistan and China are all-weather ironclad allies. No one should second-guess this alliance. China will always come to Pakistan's help whenever its sovereignty and territorial integrity will be threatened by any country. Let me tell you honestly that these remarks were seen as a great friendship gesture by Pakistanis. So let me thank you on behalf of all my countrymen, and let me start this formal interview with you. How Chinese officials and public at large seen this short war between Pakistan and China, especially the performance of the Pakistan's Air Force?
Well, I think from the Chinese perspective, the military confrontation between Pakistan and India, dating back to the beginning of this month, was very unfortunate. I personally think the Indian side was unprovoked when it launched a kind of large-scale military attack into Pakistan. And the resulting air combat between India and Pakistan now has been recorded as one of the largest scale, most important aerial confrontation in many decades. And I think, based on consensus view throughout the world, there is only one winner and there is one loser. And as I said on a very distinguished Indian TV channel, Pakistan was not the loser and India was not the winner. So I think all of us really have the objectivity to look at the result of the aerial confrontation. Now, while there is ceasefire between India and Pakistan, I still hope the Pakistani side will be on full alert, because it seems that the Indian side is still figuring out what they should do while they present a false narrative about what really happened and whether they lost 6 airplanes, some of them very sophisticated Western-made planes. They try to present their alternative truth. But I don't think the people in the world, especially manufacturing countries like France or Russia or the United States, will be misled by such misrepresentation. Further, I want to alert the friends in Pakistan that the Indian government's attempt to divert water from the Indus River will really cause a lot of damage to the people in the downstream in Pakistan. And I hope India and Pakistan, and also most likely China, need to enter into some kind of dialogue so that India will not be given a free hand to commit such very, very serious problems. Because I think to deprive water from the people in the downstream in Pakistan is a very serious crime against humanity. So I think while the tensions are reduced right now, India is very much focused on rhetorics, but there is no fundamental lifting of the tension between India and Pakistan for the moment.
Exactly. And by doing so, Isn't it true that the state of India is setting a precedent for a state like Chinese over the river Brahmaputra, where, to my information, 30 to 40% water is being controlled by China? So this might be a precedent for China as well.
Well, I would say most of the rivers flowing through India, which feed eventually into the Indus River and feeding Pakistan, originate in China's Tibetan plateau, including what we call the Yalu-Zangbujiang River in the eastern part of Tibet, which eventually also goes into India. So I think one very effective way to prevent any country in the midstream from depriving people in the downstream of the legitimate use of water is for the country in the real upper stream, that is China, to warn India about not diverting water from people in the downstream, because otherwise it will really cause unnecessary hardships, economic upheaval for the people in the downstream. So I personally hope China, India, and Pakistan will eventually sit down at a table to talk about using peace and diplomacy to solve whatever problems, rather than allowing any country to resort to unilateral actions and to violate their treaty.
That's very sane. Very sane. Very sane. And we really wish that sanity prevail in this region, because peace and sanity is the only solution if this region want to prosper. Professor, all the major capitals, all the major newspapers, including Reuters, the New York Times, and some French papers, Le Monde, they were citing and they were praising the way PAF has shot down 6 fighter jets of the Indian Air Force. I'm sure that being a major power, China has also seen this through intelligence and through other means. What exactly is the score? Can you vouch for that we managed to shot down their 6 planes?
Well, I would say the Chinese military is 100% domestic, meaning China produces all kinds of weapons and softwares and hardwares for the army, for the air force, for the navy, for the submarines, as well as for the space force, I would say. And I think China has achieved a very synthetic, highly integrated merging of what I would say the 5 different dimensions, that is space, sky, ground, surface water, and the submarine. Now, in modern warfare, this seamless synthesis of different elements of the war and different dimensions of the war preparedness will be absolutely necessary and crucial. And in times of aerial combat, you need to see further than the other side, and your missile needs to strike at greater distance than the other side. Now, based on my personal understanding of the military planes used by the great heroic Pakistani Air Force, they have achieved what I've called the seamless integration of the different dimensions of war preparedness, meaning you need to gather data from the AWACS, from the satellite, from the planes themselves, as well as the ground station. You need to be prepared way ahead of time. And when the airplanes on the other side took off on the airport, you need to see them ahead of them. And you need to be able to identify the planes on the other side and try to strike at them. Now, one thing very interestingly, the missiles launched by the Pakistani planes supplied by China did not just strike as we understand in a straight line. Now it goes up higher, gaining altitude, and then eventually it falls down, striking the other side without any pre-warning. Now it all happened in a split of a second, and the missiles are guided by data from multiple sources. That means the Pakistani planes and the missiles, as well as the data center, transmitting, collecting, analyzing data of all kinds, is much more sophisticated than whatever the Indian side has. Now, for India, They do not manufacture most of their weapons, and they tend to import weapons from different suppliers in different countries. Therefore, it will be a hugely impossible mission to integrate them together into a viable, holistic system. Because in a matter of war, a split of a second may determine life or death. And I think the fact that India lost up to about 6 sophisticated planes without their pilots being able to see the Pakistani planes or even to detect the incoming missile is truly remarkable. I think the Indian-Pakistani aero battle will be marked by history as a turning point in modern aero confrontation. And I think the way the Chinese way of synthesizing all these data and transmitting all the data, collecting them, analyzing them, and also pushing the missile in a very extraordinary and new way, unconventional way, will be the dominant feature of the aerial warfare going forward. Now, India said they want to build their own planes. I wish them good luck. It probably will take several decades because in China, we spent many years in working very hard and in gathering all the information, coming up with unique Chinese design, and then keep improving over the years, over the decades, etc., until we reach the level of perfection.
Exactly.
And between China and Pakistan, we have no reservation in sharing the most sophisticated information and data, a way of operation.
Thank you very much for making it. Thank you very much for making it clear, and that shows that what kind of ties both great friends are enjoying, and this is nothing unprecedented because all over the planet, nations are enjoying these kind of strategic cooperations. If I talk about the Indian side, they were heavily relying on the S-400 defense system provided to them by the Russians. And then their second major important thing that they were having high hopes from was the French Rafales. And on the contrary, they are trying to talk about the HQ-9 defense system, the Chinese system, PL-15 missile system, JF-17 and JC-10. So how these Pakistani weapons and these sophisticated machines, with the help of China, they were able to defy Russian or the French Rafales?
Well, first of all, I would say, philosophically, the taste of the pudding is in eating it. And in how to measure the result of aerial combat in particular, as well as the war between India and Pakistan in general, the only criteria is to see whether you shot down the planes on the other side, whether you also suffered losses, and then you compare gains versus the losses, and you will come up with a conclusion. I think in this particular case, the loss of the Indian planes, up to about 6 planes, including Mirage, including Rafale and the MiG, for example, is well recorded because you cannot just fool mankind for such a major event. And you can gather data from different sources, from Rafale itself, for example, the company which made them, as well as from the jump seat manufacturers, etc., as well as lots of satellite images, for example. So I think India should have the decency of telling its own people, sorry, we lost up to about 6 planes this time, but we want to promote peace, and let's figure out how to solve the problems between India and Pakistan in peaceful ways, and hopefully diplomacy will prevail.
Exactly.
Rather than talking about jingoistic and militaristic terms, for example, as if, for example, they can use such terms to frighten off the Pakistani side. Now, in this regard, allow me to mention, and I say this with due respect for all the other countries, including France and Russia, and also with respect for the Indian people, I would say the Chinese military has already achieved a very high level of superiority and excellence. China has always measured up, not against India, not against Russia, but against the United States. And China has already accumulated
Professor, is this one major reason? Could this be the one major reason why a superpower like USA, who was least bothered about this conflict 2 days before this dogfight, and suddenly they were forced to jump in for the ceasefire. Could this be the one reason, the Chinese sophisticated superiority?
Well, I understand before the war broke out involving airplanes, the United States warned both India and Pakistan not to scramble their F-16 fighter planes made by the United States, whatever their reason. I do not want to go into that. Therefore, in this direct aerial confrontation between India and Pakistan, no U.S.-made fighter planes were actually scrambled, while Indian side, in their version of alternative truths, they kept saying that they've fought down the F-16 fighter planes on the Pakistani side. So I think, first of all, we need to sift through all these different, sometimes conflicting versions of the narratives. And I would say the Pakistani side had a home run this time, and the Indian side really suffered a huge defeat. But I hope the Indians.
Professor, because I'm running short of time and I got so many questions for you, I would like to hear more about some other questions from you. India is now all set. I just heard from the media that they're all set to go for stealth manufacturing within India, and they are trying to, manufacture a stealth plane. But we were eyeing at J-35 as well, which is one of the finest thing that China has produced. So should we see it on the card for Pakistan, the J-35 project?
Well, for the Indian government's announced plan to build their own version of the stealth plane is very audacious. However, first of all, it involves a lot of uncertainty, and it may or may not be a success. It may most likely be a failure. So I wish the Indian side good luck, but we need to be very closely monitoring the situation. But allow me to mention one thing. For a country like India, to build the top quality stealth plane is nothing easy. And you really need to accumulate experiences and know-how over the decades. So for a budgeted time of 10 years to produce the stealth plane probably is erring on the overly ambitious side. So I hope China and Pakistan can closely cooperate with each other. And I truly believe the Chinese government will have no reservation and no hesitation in sharing with the Pakistani brothers and sisters the most sophisticated hardware and software, as well as China's gaining superiority in space program AWACS, for example.
That will be great. That will be truly great for Pakistan. Professor, just a few days back, our Director General ISPR, Lieutenant General Ahmad Sharif, while he was talking to the press, he said that China is also a party in Kashmir dispute. How do you see this statement?
Well, first of all, I personally have a great problem with India's position. India now claims that whatever the British Indian Empire left of them should be recognized as the Indian territory. Now, this is false in the sense that between China and India, for example, for thousands of years, we had no territorial disputes. And the problems were created by the British colonists. So I don't think the Indian side really has a legitimate claim to say, well, there is a line drawn by the British Indian colonists, and that line, without being accepted at all by any of the Chinese government, should be recognized at the China-Indian border. Now, I would say, whatever the British Indian colonists didn't achieve by themselves should never be held by the current Indian government as the final border between China and India. There are territorial disputes between China and India, and I hope we will be able to use a lot of wisdom to solve them rather than being bogged down by such territorial disputes. There is very serious territorial disputes involving Kashmir. That's well recorded, and I do not want to go further and further into details because there are different ways to look at it. But one thing for sure is that Kashmir is disputed territory.
Obviously, and without resolving that issue, very issue, this region cannot attain peace. Professor, you're absolutely right. Before I wind it up, I need to ask you another important question that is related to Afghanistan. We recently witnessed some meetings between Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Chinese foreign ministers, that too in the China. And then the news came that the CPEC, a part of BRI, is extending to Afghanistan as well. Is Afghanistan on the same page, the roadmap of peace and progress with China and Pakistan?
Well, you may know that China's beginning of the economic reform and opening to the outside world started in 1978, 79. This was exactly the time when the situation in Afghanistan was lost. It was involved in 10 years war, initiated by the former Soviet Union. Subsequently, it was involved in 20 years war, initiated by the United States. So by now, China is already the largest economy if we use purchasing power parity, whereas Afghanistan is still bogged down in poverty and lack of development. So my point of view for the people and the government in Afghanistan is that focus on development. Don't be bogged down by extremism, terrorism, or backwardness, for example. The people in Afghanistan have great aspirations for better living standards, and by cooperating between China, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and other neighboring countries, I'm pretty sure tomorrow for Afghanistan will be much brighter than yesterday or even today.
Professor, you had a chance to deal with the Indian media at multiple news channels. You had a chance to appear on some international outlets, and just recently you had also been part of Pakistani news shows and talk shows. What exactly is the major difference between Indian news channels and the Pakistani news media's handling? I'm just asking it on a very lighter note.
Yes, indeed. I sometimes am shocked by the lack of objectivity and the decency, the way the Indian side is raising their questions. They completely present an alternative narrative.
Exactly.
They seem to live in a parallel universe. They seem to be completely detached from the realities on the ground. And I think the more they endure in that direction, they probably will make themselves very much as a laughing stock in the world. They even send delegations to several important countries to present their version of the truth. I don't think any country will be fooled by their...
教授那句祝印方好运说的轻描淡写，却句句扎心。印度要造第5代隐形战机，可能成功，也可能失败。只不过给了别人是万一失败，而给了三哥是万一成功呢？对吧？这不是唱衰而是冷静的提醒。制造顶级隐形飞机不仅是工业水平的标志，更是国家系统能力的集大成。三哥的问题是野心很大，但经验太少，工业体系不完整，连螺丝都可能要进口。曾经搞什么 LCA 光辉战机整整搞了30年，最后连自己的空军都不愿意多买2件。就这。你要是个做生意的，说我10年之内造出全球最强战机，这就像开一家苍蝇馆子，扬言要打败米其林3星。高志凯教授冷冷一句，这很可能是一次失败。这不只是技术的问题而是体制、战略认知跟历史包袱的总和。在教授看来，中巴之间不是朋友那么简单，而是兄弟。他说我真的相信中国的政府将毫无保留地与巴基斯坦兄弟姐妹分享最复杂的硬件跟软件。这意味着什么？是卫星？是导弹？是 AI 系统吗？是高超音速平台？甚至可能包括中国太空项目的优势。这不仅仅是技术输出，更是信任的输出。打仗靠武器结盟靠情义。中国有的是武器，也从不吝啬情义。中巴关系早就从战略合作走向了命运共同体，而这也是印度最不愿意看到的中巴合体新现实。印度冲刺军工志向高远，但路遥未知。中巴战略联手，共进退已成默契。克什米尔的问题依旧未解，火药桶依旧在燃烧。阿富汗渴望崛起，破茧成蝶，也许指日可待。 咱们所看到是四国博弈中的裂缝与桥梁，是世界秩序变化的缩影。历史的长河总在意想不到地方转弯，看懂今天的中巴印，你就能预判亚洲未来的风暴。如果你看到这里，说明你已经是思想高于无常，远光远超联合国的硬核观点。感谢各位家人们跟大钊一起在老友记燃烧青春的热血，点赞、订阅、鼓励。下期将带你深挖印度军工是不是面子